everyone, this is Dr. Russ Jones.
And Brad Kennan.
We are wide open. How are you?
I'm tired, man.
Tired because you just drove from Columbus to Florida today. That's why everybody's seeing your cottage there.
Yeah, not non-green screen. I tried to go outside and do it on the balcony with the blue ocean in the background, the Gulf of Mexico, but
that would have been cool.
It did not work, and there's yahoos driving up and down the street with cars and making noise, and that's just no, I'm good. So I'll just hang out here and talk to you this way.
Okay. So is your beautiful bride down there with you today?
She is.
All right. Well, that's
my bride. Cool. My bride, my wife.
Yeah.
You mean?
Yeah. Your bride.
I think bride can only be used for like the first year or something. Yeah.
Okay.
After 30 years, they're just wives.
I see. You gonna ask how I am today?
Yeah, how are you? Are you ready? Are you feeling like a champion?
I feel like a champion today.
It sucks because I didn't go to the gym yesterday because I was doing 4th of July stuff, which I should have gone anyway, but I didn't go, and then I didn't go today. So I've gone down, checked out the fitness center in where we're staying in the condos, and it can probably do just about everything I want it to do. And
you just need a little grind in there, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna hit that in the morning and be good to go. So
I saw a lot of patients today around 8 an hour, and somebody ran into the building with a car weeks ago. Second time in 6 years.
I would say that's more than once.
Yeah, they drive right in through the brick wall, through the concrete wall blocks, and then through the drywall into a patient room. This time, no one was hit.
Now, can I guess age group of the person that did this?
Sure.
Over 60?
Yes.
Okay. Over 70?
The sex? Yes.
I'm not. We're just going to assume we know.
I'm just going to say this because it's going to get me in trouble.
Right.
The building's been hit 3 times in 30 years, and each time it's been a female driver. So I'm not saying that anything. I'm just saying the 3 times it's been hit.
You're just throwing facts out there, right?
Yeah. I'm not saying that
we're not making
women are good or bad drivers.
Nothing. No blanket statements.
No, I'm just telling you it's happened 3 times and it was women drivers. I'm just saying. So I didn't feel like going to the gym, but I made myself go do a very hard workout so I could come on here and tell you that I felt like a freaking champion today.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, anyway.
Hey, I got a question for you today.
Does
that surprise you?
Go ahead.
All right. So, in Bigfoot world here, have you ever personally came across a piece of Bigfoot evidence? I mean, this could be, a footprint that you found. It could be some hair. It could be, whatever. So, have you came across anything like that?
No, not personal. I mean, I've been called in on stuff and cash tracks and things like that other people found. So I've seen that. But as far as a piece of evidence walking around in the woods, no. And honestly, it's very possible I've walked past hundreds of pieces of evidence.
I'm looking over here on my bookshelf because I think I have
just
cast that you poured from a witness somewhere. I have one somewhere here, another.
Okay. But you just don't know unless you're really paying a lot of attention. And that for me, evidence comes in 2 ways. You have this visual sighting, then you have a piece of evidence associated with that visual sighting. So, or you have a footprint with a piece of hair. So there's 2 things that you're looking for with a piece of evidence to know it's a good piece of evidence.
Okay.
That's how I feel. I know that people find hair or they find certain things out there and they can look at a microscope and say, okay, this is a good piece of hair because of the shaft is clear or whatever. It doesn't have the mitochondrial
transparent,
DNA,
doesn't have
transparent, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, you're thinking, well, this could be possible, but it also could be something else. But if you see a track and a piece of hair on a barbed wire fence and the track continues, to me, that's a really good piece of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you see the Bigfoot stick its hand in the thing and it cuts its hand on the piece of plastic it was trying to get the animal out of, and a piece of drain tile. I think I remember something like that at one point in time, and there was a piece of evidence there. Somebody physically saw that. That's a good piece of evidence. But no, I've not seen any of that. I've seen, like I said, the last road crossing I had, I turned around, went back, looked for tracks, looked for any evidence, and I saw nothing.
Yeah, and that's probably the way it does the majority of the time. I think it's interesting too. Like everybody's interested in these tree structures now, which may or may not be anything, right? So,
Right.
but in the 70s, Bob Titmus, some of the other ones that were the really famous early Bigfoot researchers, they used to look for hair and apparently find some in the tree breaks, which I think the twists or the breaks are compelling. But we don't have anybody. Everybody is saying that Bigfoot's doing all these structures, but nobody's pulling hair that I'm aware of because we're not getting any of it sent to us. And I mean, I probably get hair. I mean, every month I get something sent to me.
Right.
It may or may not be Bigfoot hair. There is a type. You remember there was Dr. Henner Fehrenbach that, there's actually films on the internet. You can go on there and look and see what the different types of animals. I have slides I use for my microscopes to compare what they look like, or I'll have one up on the screen when I'm doing there, trying to see whether it matches the type of a Bigfoot hair, so to speak.
Sure. But
yes,
do you know who we can ask about this Bigfoot evidence and get down to the nuts and bolts of trying to prove that this animal exists? Our guest tonight.
Do tell.
He is a professor or faculty. I don't know if that's, I wrote down professor teaching science and technology at North Carolina State University, the Wolf Pack. We're going to add Darby Orcutt to us. Did I introduce you correctly?
Close enough.
Okay. All right.
Hey, Darby, good to see you, my friend.
Yes. Good to see you.
I first met Darby it was before COVID, because we had tentatively made some arrangements that he was going to swing by West Virginia, spend some time, or Ohio, I don't remember which, spend some time with me in the woods. I was going to definitively show him Bigfoot, and we were just going to get some samples so he could just save them for later. But COVID came and interrupted our time in the woods together, although we have talked about trying to make that happen in the future.
Sure.
So It's good. That's been a couple of years now. So, and Darby and I talk pretty often. I'd say, maybe every now and then him and I talk on the phone for a bit or whatever. So I really came to admire him, and boy, this is somebody that can really educate us on, the Bigfoot DNA stuff coming up.
Right. So in case people do not know, Darby is going to use, I think you're going to use some computing power, right? That you have access to at North Carolina State. And there's a difference, right?
Yes.
And you're going to do a DNA study on this cryptid that is out there. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Well, let me put you straight here because this is what we're doing. So I'm leading a project. I've got several colleagues who are collaborating with me on this, including genetics and genomics specialists. And what we're doing is that we're going to take a look at unusual physical samples. Now, what is an unusual physical sample? Well, I have heard from talking with folks in the Bigfoot community that there are reports of people who have found hairs that have unusual features, that have found hairs that don't match those of known animals, and yet there hasn't been any genetic testing of this material done to determine what it is. And that seems to me like something that would make for a very interesting question. If you have, whether they're hair samples or other samples that are unusual, well, you'd like to know what they are. And so that's what we're doing. We're going to be looking at these things. Whether I know that folks have already offered some hairs. Folks have already offered some handprints, these large handprints that people find that are presumably of sebum or skin surface lipids, SSLs. And I'm curious to see what sorts of other physical samples people might have found, might produce. that they find interesting. And so this is the question of the study is we're not looking to prove something in particular. We're looking to simply determine what are these things. These things are unusual. And let's see what we find by actually looking at them.
So you have this piece of evidence, and you, which is a common thing that we've heard in some studies have done prior. It's been tainted by humans, so it's a contaminated sample. So is that possibly contaminated, quote unquote, because we're very closely possibly related to this creature that we don't know about, and it might be kind of close to a human, but not really. They're just not taking it down far enough. So because nobody wants to decode the entire genome of this sample, or I don't know if they can do that. So how is this going to be different from anything prior that has been done?
Yeah, that's a great question. At this point, nobody has done that work that deeply in a way that has been credible. In other words,
Okay.
that has been peer reviewed, that has been to scientific standards. And so there has been to this point, the only published peer-reviewed scientific publications that have done this are the ones coming out of the Brian Sykes study several years ago. And Dr. Sykes looked at only a handful of samples from North America. So only looked at 6 or 8, or maybe it was a dozen. I don't know. Some very small number. He was the first to say that it was just completely an exploratory study, that, and the fact that he was able to, he and his team were able to identify every single one of those samples as a known species. He was the first to say, well, that, we only looked at a few samples, so that doesn't prove a null hypothesis either. In other words, it doesn't say they're all going to turn out.
Let me throw that in there, Darby, that there was many of us, myself included, that sent samples to Dr. Sykes and hadn't heard anything. So when we requested, an update, that I was told that not all the samples were tested, and the samples that were not tested were destroyed.
Yeah, and that is unfortunate. And that's absolutely something that is not going to happen with this study.
So my question is this. So those samples were destroyed.
Yeah.
I have a tinfoil hat that I usually have with me most of the time. So my question is this, Darby, will you tell us definitely if you run this sample, right? So you run the sample and it comes up as an unknown primate that has not been identified. Does your genome, does that data go against any governmental database that the government could know that you have that sample, and men in black suits, or, the men in black show up in their black Suburbans, they walk in and they say, Darby, we need to talk to you for a minute in your office. And you have these samples, and I know what your findings are, but these samples have not been tested and they've been destroyed.
You've got to be wearing your tinfoil hat to worry.
I'm asking every single question.
I was actually having
Russ laughs at me, but I don't trust anybody at all. Especially when the government. Let's say that I trust people. I do not trust our federal government, and especially things like this with the way it could impact logging, and it could impact, going into parks and all this stuff that's out there. I just, I have my own theories on that. But anyway, is there any way that could happen?
Not really.
Okay. All right. You said not really.
That if somebody wasn't that interested, that they couldn't, I mean, obviously, as you know, this day and age, if somebody is that interested in you, if the government is that interested in somebody, they can, they can certainly wiretap everything.
Hey,
But no,
there's a lot of weird stuff out there.
In any reasonable world, absolutely not, Brad.
Okay. All right, I'm just asking.
I was having this conversation actually with a colleague yesterday. A colleague is not involved
I'm
in this
not
study
crazy.
right now. No, we were talking about this because I was saying, hey, this is a question that I'm being asked. You are not the first person to ask me this. Is will your results? Will the government know your results before we do? And the reality is that scientists who work in academia, unless in the rare exceptions that they're working directly with, particularly the Department of Defense, there's no there's no interest from the government in what they're doing.
Right. If you say so, I believe you.
And actually, I think that I think I can say with assurance that most of my colleagues would be pretty unwilling to cooperate with a government that was trying to.
All right. Well, let me say that I'm glad to hear that.
Let me just add here that one of the things that I've noticed, I mean, there's a couple different things going on that contribute to the rare of getting samples. One is the rarity of the animal. There's not that many people out there. There's not that many people getting samples. There's been a couple of, I'm going to say, preliminary studies that maybe were not in very depth that were done. And the Bigfoot community in general is not very trusting now of academia in terms of sending in their stuff, because it's hard to get stuff. And then, they're either not going to test it, like was the case with Sykes, with me and some other people, but they are going to, just do something that's so preliminary that it's just really not worth the effort of doing. Why not save your sample until later, whenever, the testing's better evolved some way. Like, now eDNA is out there, and we didn't have that so much 25 years ago. So I guess that's one of the things I'm curious about is, how is this study? I mean, aside from the fact that I'm friends with you and I know you, and I know that people can trust giving samples to you, but how is the work that you're going to be doing, the study that you're doing, different than the things that we've seen previously in the Bigfoot community?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that, Russ. And it is completely different, and it's different. I've been working for behind the scenes now for several years to put this project together, to make sure that I had the right team. The experts who are working on this are experts who will not be questioned by the scientific community from a standpoint of like, these are the experts. And the other thing that I've done is I've gone through all the work of filling out the right forms, putting this together as a real bona fide university study. I have had to go through a process of what we call IRB, our Institutional Review Board, which is an ethics review. This is to make sure that we are treating people ethically, that we're going to do what we say we're going to do. There is a system in place so that even if something happens to me, if I drop dead tomorrow, folks will get their results. That is, this isn't dependent on an individual. Every sample that we take, we are going to give individual results to the person who submits that sample, or the people. You will hear the results of the study, whatever it may be. If it's a bear, if it's a new species of primate, if it's too degraded to tell what it is, whatever the results are, you're going to get those results. And that's, that's an absolute. We're going to be looking at a lot more samples too. We're not going to be doing like Sykes did. We're just going to be looking at 6 or 8 samples or cherry picking those. The other thing that was odd to me about that study is that it didn't seem that they did any. They really looked at the samples ahead of time. They sort of jumped to the genetic testing. It would seem to me that if all those samples that they ended up being known species, that they could have told that, or at least they could have told that for many of them, maybe all of them, if they just looked at them under a microscope first. That study was in conjunction with a media production, so maybe there was something to that they were trying to make it good TV rather than just do a scientific study. This is a study. Now, will it be covered by media? I'm sure it will be, but this is a scientific study that's happening independent of that. So I mean, and that's something that I've been really, I've really looked at. I've really looked at the relationship that there's been between the Bigfoot community and academia in the past, and unfortunately, there haven't been good experiences there. And that's something that I wanted to make sure that I was doing this right. That when I say, when it says, hey, you will get results, again, there's a procedure for that, and there's a promise. And actually, we get in a lot of trouble with the university if we don't do that.
I know
we're doing this all above board. Now, I know a lot. It's interesting because I've had a lot of people who've told me, and I've tracked down some of these folks where they have sent samples to a professor somewhere who said, "Oh yeah, I'll look at them," or "Oh, I'll test them in the lab." But they've been doing, and then they don't hear back from them, or the samples are destroyed, or whatever it may be. Those studies, other than the Sykes study, have happened outside of a study. Really, that's just been somebody saying, "Yeah, I'll look at it."
Right.
I had people years ago who were saying, let me send you this so that you can take a look at it, or you and your colleagues can take a look at it. And I'm like, no, I don't want your samples until we have the study, we have it set up, we have the procedures in place. And so it starts with, we have an intake form that folks can fill out. It says, here, this is what I have. This is why I think it's interesting. From there, then I go and I schedule a brief conversation with that person, either over the computer or on the phone or what have you, to ask a few more questions and all that. At that point, if we're ready to take the sample, we say, okay, here's the information on how to send it to us and where to send it. So we're not taking anything until we're ready to take it. And when we take it, it's with that promise that, yes, you will receive your individual results. We allow folks, there's 3 different ways that folks can be credited. If you want to send me a sample and you want everybody to know this is your sample that you found and everything, then your name will get the credit. It'll be attached to that. If you want to send a sample and you want your name to be acknowledged that, yes, you contributed something to the study, but you don't want to be attached to the particular results, fine. Well, you can do that. If you want to remain completely anonymous, in other words, if you want to send in a sample, you want to find out yourself what it is, but you don't want to be mentioned that you had anything to do with this, that's absolutely fine too. And in no cases are we going to be divulging specific locations.
I know that in the past,
that's something, if we, whatever we find, we certainly don't want to be sending folks,
yeah,
sending
showing up
folks
somebody's
to
backyard. Yeah. I know in the past, people would say 10 years ago or 15 years ago, people would say, hey, I've got this. There was really for a long time not a place to get something DNA tested. And then it was very expensive to have it done, a lot of times around $5,000 or more. And I can't tell you the number of people, dozens over the years that had stuff, and they'd say, where can I send this? Even if they had the money. But so essentially, NC State has a number of DNA machines, I think 5, if I remember correctly from our conversations in the past. And so these are the machines that are going to be used for the study. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't think I gave you a number, but
okay. Well, I can
yeah,
imagine a lot of things. I'm good at that.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think that this gets back to what Brad was asking about was, how thorough of genetic testing can you do? And the answer is absolutely. Very, very thorough.
So all the way down to
all the way down. Yeah,
okay.
No, absolutely. I mean, obviously it depends on the sample. We can't study a sample in more detail than the sample itself exists for the sample itself. But that's the nice thing here is that working with colleagues who run 2 different genetics labs. So we have that duplication there. We also have access, if we to go and to move into looking at nuclear DNA. We have access to. That's what I was saying. We have multiple machines, or we can work with that in multiple labs. And so, but it comes down to what's really warranted. And Brad, you raised this question that people have raised of, hey, when something comes back and it looks human, is it really human or is it just really, really close to human? And that's a really great question when you're dealing with a Sasquatch hypothesis, because that could be the case, and that's one of the things that that's one of the things I've been determined from the very beginning, that we look at the full scope of what are the possibilities here, and that full scope ranges from, hey, these may be known species, or these may be unknown species of all kinds of animals, right? From bears or whatever it may be, through if this may be an unknown species. We may be dealing with an unknown species of primate with some sample. We may be dealing with an unknown population of even humans,
right? Something in the Homo line
on the other end. Something in the Homo line, or something that's even Homo sapiens, but a divergent, a recognizable population. It's a possibility. Again, I'm not arguing at this point the likelihood of these things. I'm just saying that there's a full range of what's possible. And we have to be able to address that full range in the research. Now, that said, we're not going to be doing, obviously, if we test something, it's a bear. Okay, it's a bear.
But
there's you look at these things, and you sort of have to look at them in the ranges you go. And if you find that something is this, well, if it's a bear, it's probably not worth going to the next level of testing if you're really certain of what it is at that point. But we have that capacity, and we're prepared to do that advanced level of testing as each individual sample warrants.
But hopefully, the bear samples and or the bear hair or the elk hair, whatever that is, you're hoping to kind of weed that out prior to doing any DNA, visually, or matching it up on a slide. And so let's just not go down that path.
No, absolutely. And that's why I say we're looking at we're looking at samples that are unusual for whatever reason.
So they're vetted in some way, shape, or form.
I mean, we are open at this stage to what might make them unusual or interesting. We're not putting too many hard and fast guidelines around that.
So when you say unusual or interesting, does that go outside the realm of Sasquatch? Could that be, you know, some other cryptid out there that
Alien hair?
It certainly could.
the dog man or something of that sort that you know, but we're going to assume he's got dog hair anyway, so we're just going to pass him off as canine. So that's Russ.
I mean,
that's one of Russ's favorite
subjects. That's the other thing that we've done is draw the parameters of this study so that we, you know, because here's what it comes down to is that any physical sample that somebody finds is a sample of something.
Sure.
Okay. So if it looks unusual, we want to determine what it is and why it looks unusual. One interesting finding we could have from this is, let's just bracket off and say we find that a number, you know, I heard you mentioning before I came on about, you know, these alleged features of Sasquatch hair, or hairs that, you know, are lacking in a medulla, or hairs that are, you know, have a certain scaling pattern or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, these are ideas that people have about what may be features of Sasquatch hair. But the reality is we really don't know. But it would be interesting to look at those hairs that have those unusual scaling patterns, that have these unusual features, and figure out what they are. Now, maybe some of them may end up being, maybe they are bear hair, but that might tell us something about bear hair that we didn't know, the way that it presents.
So in terms of,
there may be a number of different outcomes of this research where we might learn some interesting things about known species or even possibly unknown species.
So I know that in the past, when people had hair, of course, we were talking about that there was usually not DNA in the middle of the shaft. So it doesn't necessarily mean that people need to look for like a root bulb in the hair sample that they have. They should just send it in general and let you do the determination. Are there other types of things? You know, we're talking about, we find handprints, face prints on glass windows, glass doors. And of course, people are swabbing those. I know that one of my friends in Iowa had sent you a sample of that. What other types of samples would people be sending into you aside from the skin surface lipids, which is fingerprint and face print, or hair samples like blood? Is there other type of things?
I would love it if somebody had a blood sample to send. That would be great. Blood samples generally are generally you're able to get a lot more genetic information from a blood sample than you are from a hair sample. You know, the form that I have, I tried to imagine what are the types of samples that people might send. I also will say I have a whole host of experts who are not part of the project now, but are sort of on deck, ready to come in case samples in their areas of expertise come in. So I was just talking yesterday with a colleague who's a osteology specialist. So if any bone or tooth comes in, wow,
okay, that's another sample. Yeah, that's good.
Person to look at that, and so she would come on board. You know, she's ready to come on board as soon as there's something that's in her area of expertise. If flesh, certainly. I have had one offer so far of scat, and scat is a little bit harder to deal with, but it's something that we want people. In other words, if there's something to offer, we want people to offer it to us and let us figure out the prioritization.
Okay, that's helpful.
Right.
I've even got on the form. I've got the box you can check off if you want to submit a body part or an entire body.
All right.
I will say
that's hopeful thinking, you know.
Never know.
Well, this is the thing. I was going through this whole process, and I'm like, that would be amazing.
Yeah, maybe there's some guy waiting. He was like, man, I got this. I chopped it. I saw this Bigfoot and he stuck his hand underneath my cabin door and I whacked his finger off with an axe and I got this Bigfoot finger, but I can't prove it until now. And I'm going to send it to Darby. Yeah. So how did this go when you went in? So you did this, you fill out some paperwork at your college, right? So you go in and you went into this review board.
Putting it lightly.
Right. So you filled out all this stuff. So you got your lunch tray, right? And you just in the faculty lounge and you're walking through and did people like, hey, there's that guy that's doing that. He's that Bigfoot guy. He's gonna, was there that whispers or was he like, or were there people like, hey, Darby, I heard you're doing something really cool, or that's that guy, like the people getting up when you go sit down, they like get up and, walk away and they don't want to, be around the crazy Bigfoot guy or anything like that.
No, I mean, honestly, I will say I've been delighted in general over the years with the response of my colleagues to the strange things that I am interested in.
Okay.
They know me. They know the approach that I take. And these are very valid questions. I mean, who isn't curious about these things?
Right.
Now, I will say that there are, there's certainly a few colleagues who probably shake their heads a little bit.
Sure.
I had one colleague when I was starting to teach my course on science and the strange, gifted me with a huge stack of Skeptical Inquirer magazines to make sure that I was well versed on skeptical arguments against anything unusual.
All right,
but that's fine. I think that it's good. It's good to be skeptical about things, but I think that the flip side of that I think folks often forget is it's really good to be curious. And science is really about addressing our curiosity. And I am very, very curious about this area, about this subject. My colleagues who are working with me have other sorts of motivations on the whole, I will say. And that's one of the things that's so important, given my background of putting together these highly multidisciplinary teams to work on tough questions of whatever kind. That's one of the things that I recognized was really needed in order to address this question. One of my questions has to do with what are these strange things, and is this Sasquatch thing, is there something to this? My colleagues are interested in developing new forensic techniques. My colleagues are interested in training their PhD students, and PhD students, here's one of the wonderful things about this, is that PhD students very rarely have the opportunity to do genetic testing of true unknowns. They're usually working with specimens that they know what they are. They may be trying to determine something particular about them, but to work with something, and that's, there's one of the PhD students in particular who's supporting this project and working with it is just, just really, really excited. She's just wondering, what might we find? Wouldn't it be cool if?
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's a fantastic attitude to bring. I think this is really interesting stuff. And but like I say, the project, the what is of interest to the Bigfoot community is one small piece of a larger project. But this is what it takes to motivate researchers who really know what they're doing. Russ, right. I shared your frustration years ago with not knowing where to send people who said they had samples that they wanted to test. That was a lot of my motivation for running this project, because I recognized as I started to look around and I started to look at some of these reports that people were sharing with me from the commercial labs, it was like, this just isn't good work. Some of it, people were paying labs and they were getting, they were given results, but those results were kind of suspect, in my opinion. One Bigfoot investigator even had taken, he was asking me, how did this happen? Because he had a sample and he'd sent part of it to one commercial lab and part of it to another. He'd paid both of them, and he got two wildly different results as to the species. And he said, how could this happen? I said, well, on the one hand, what you found as a clump of hair could have been the hair of more than one species. I mean, it could have been nesting material, or it could have been, so perhaps both labs did the work the right way and they got the results that they got. Now, in the case of one lab particularly, he showed me the report. The species result was a known species, but absolutely not real credible for the area where the specimen had been found. It would have had to have been a very large animal, way outside of its normal range.
Can you tell us what kind of animal it was?
It was a wolf, and it was found somewhere where there is, a wolf would have had to have wandered 500 miles from their known range to be where the sample was found. So it's not nothing's impossible, but
sure.
Yeah, it was very strange. There were some other telltale things about that lab's reporting, though, that made me think that perhaps they had been more than happy to take his money. They'd been more than happy to kind of, we ran it. Oh, we looked. Oh, it's closest to this. Let's just say it's that and move on. And unfortunately, so I don't have a lot of I don't have a lot of trust in many of the commercial labs. I think there are some that are really, really good. But I do also know that, even with the commercial labs, they're limited in the work that they do. And if you've got something, like Brad was saying, if you give them a sample and it's really close to something known, that's their protocol is generally to just that's what it must be, and move on. You're not gonna you're not gonna find a research scientist who's doing that work for a commercial lab,
right? You got to think too. A commercial lab, they're in it to make money. So if they can, say, I'm going to quote you X amount of dollars to go step 1 through 5, and I can stop the science at step 2 and save money for step 3, 4, and 5 and still take your money, they're going to do that. Money. Well, that's just the way people work. Yeah. And they're going to look at the person and say, you don't know, you're not smart enough to know the difference. So let's just leave it at that. That's kind of the way I see it happening.
Well, even those who do it ethically, they're not necessarily going to have the folks who could, they may end up saying, well, it looks like this, but it's degraded, so we're not quite sure.
Okay.
And that's a very ethical response for them, and that's sure. That's proper. But again, the folks, my colleagues are the folks who are training all the people who work in those labs.
Right.
My collaborators are the folks who are writing the manuals and the protocols for how to do this work that all the labs use. So it's a when if we're dealing with the unusual, then we really need to have the top people working on it. And so
I agree with you.
That's why, folks ask, oh, what commercial lab can I send it to? And I always rankle a little bit because I have not found a commercial lab that really truly has the expertise to deal with it if that is indeed what a sample proves to be.
Gotcha. Okay.
I mean, I remember the one story. Of course, a lot of people remember. I mean, I've said for a long time, I believe there's a lot of samples that are out there, that videos, game cam photos that people are holding. And I think that when the animal is acknowledged, that we're going to see all these things come out all at once, and everybody's going to think, well, why did we not have all this stuff all along? Because, I just believe personally that's what's going to happen. But I know Darby and I had talked about, there was a story of supposedly a well-known investigator in the western part of the country, and he had a good witness that it was a habituation where supposedly a Bigfoot was coming in around his house to get food and whatnot, and stepped up on the porch and raised up, and there was a light bulb up there, and it broke the light bulb, and it had bled, and he had went and collected this blood sample. And then, when a testing came back, that it came back as human, and apparently that investigator threw the towel in and just said, it's just never going to happen. And so, here's a chance for one of the first times in the history of Bigfoot that people are going to do a serious, deep dive into it. So, if there's people out there that are listening that have a good sample, I think this is a good chance, for them to get their sample treated with respect, and them personally be treated with respect.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I mean, that's, and Russ, I'm still trying to track down that story.
Yeah.
I still have yet to hear that story other than secondhand. Although I now know where I now know where it's coming from, but I haven't had a chance to hear it directly from the individual yet.
Well, if they're listening, or somebody on our podcast knows them personally, maybe they'll reach out to us. Either reach out.
I can probably track that person down, maybe myself. It's just taking time, and Darby, that we're just all involved with so much that we're trying to fit Bigfoot in the cracks of time we have.
Right.
No, absolutely. But part of the way that I knew I had the right people working with me was in the very first meeting that we had, getting the project off the ground. My colleagues who think the chances of us finding Sasquatch are, very, very small. But they from the very beginning were talking about, okay, how do we do this in the least destructive way possible? How do we do this in a way that we preserve these samples for future testing? We need, and one of my colleagues used this phrase, said, we need to make sure that every sample we receive is being treated as precious, because it is to the individual who collected it.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
Whoa. I'm like, that's not me saying that. That's my colleague who, again, thinks, maybe there's a Bigfoot. Can't say for sure there isn't, but certainly,
right.
But has that much respect for the work that citizen scientists, investigators, and individuals are doing out there in collecting these samples. And that, at the end of the day, the study can only find what folks submit to us. So if there's Sasquatch out there to be found, well, we're going to need samples of it.
All right. So
now we will do. What I can promise you is that this team is going to look at these samples in a way that you have never seen happen before. This is the opportunity. If there's somebody out there who, Brad, you're right. If they collected a finger,
this is the time to get it in
the jar,
because
now is the time.
Because the guy in the black suits will not come to your department and take that finger, and he'll get the finger back.
Hey, there's that dude on TikTok, that he swears that he has a body and everybody's stupid for not believing you. Here's his chance. He can get a little piece of it.
Absolutely. So, as we wind this down, I'm going to ask a favor of you, Darby. When this thing is proved real, and you're going to have your press release at the university with the podium and the 37 mics, and you're going to be up there talking, and I just want to have a ticket to that. Russ and I'll drive down. I'll drive from Columbus. I'll grab Russ.
Yeah,
I'll grab Russ on the way down, and we will drive right down to Raleigh, Durham, and we'll take you out to dinner, and we will thumb our nose at everybody that said that these things don't exist.
Well, that would be an amazing outcome.
Yeah.
I'd be the first to enjoy that outcome very much. But that's what I say. I mean, at this point, those folks who have those samples, this is the time to bring them out, because there has never been the opportunity to have this caliber of folks working on this. My expertise is in putting these teams together. My expertise is not in doing genetic research. My expertise is in putting together the right people. This team is amazing. They are brilliant. I've got the genetics and genomics experts, including an expert in wildlife forensics who is outstanding.
I don't even know what that is, but
and then I brought in late in the project. I met a newer colleague that I hadn't met before, and brought him in, who's a microscopist. So in other words, he uses a microscope, look at things, and he has an amazing. He came to NC State about 2 years ago, and he got a great startup package with a really crazy expensive microscope, like 7 figures. And he can actually look at strands of DNA.
Wow,
that's cool.
Microscope.
Okay.
And he is, and he's got a lot of expertise in, working with like these lipid samples and things like that. And so I was delighted to bring him on board. As I say, I have a whole host of experts, who are ready to come in. You asked, do people laugh? I've found that my colleagues are really, both at NC State and elsewhere, are really interested in this. They're not ready to go out publicly and say that they're interested in this.
Well, everybody's interested, so, but they're going to jump right on board. Like I said,
yeah.
When you have that definitive information at the press release, and we're sitting there watching, then they're going to come out and say, we were all did this as a team, and here we are.
That's okay with me. I don't care.
It's not going to be Darby's just standing out there by himself. So,
hey, so the big question, of course, and the most important thing is, how can people get samples to you?
Correct.
So I have a link to the online intake form that I'm hoping you'll share and put in your show notes. I know I've shared that with you. I also would appreciate it if you would share. I know some folks ask, not just how they can contribute potential samples, but also how they can contribute. And we do have a way. And I've also shared with you the link if folks do want to financially contribute to the project, to the work that I'm doing at NC State. That is not, certainly not mandatory, but
sure,
that's a wonderful thing. That would allow us to support more deeply testing more and more samples. It's really exciting times, because we just launched this I guess it was about a month ago, we launched the intake form. We've been getting a trickle of offers and starting to schedule some of those follow-up conversations with folks. So we'll be getting samples in towards the end of the summer, probably the first samples physically arriving. And we're going to get to testing those. And I'm really excited to see what sorts of results we may see.
Thank you, Darby. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. And like I said, we'll get I'll get all that information from Russ. We'll put it on our show notes so somebody can do that. And maybe Russ will throw it out there on his Instagram and his Twitter and our Instagram.
West Virginia Bigfoot stuff out there too. So
Twitter, blah, blah.
And it's for somebody that's been in Bigfoot a long time, I just want to say thank you, because we haven't had a chance to do this, and we all take a lot of heat for it, and I'm sure you are too. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, this is one of those things where I see a way of hopefully correcting something that science has done wrong, in that, scientists by and large have sort of like wash their hands of this. They've sort of been dismissive of this subject without ever having actually investigated it.
Right.
And so, and I understand, I don't knock folks for not investigating it, because, as I've found, even talking with folks, and, is that when somebody tells me that somebody has a sample, and I go to them and, oh no, it's a friend of a friend who has a sample, and,
sure.
And that sort of thing. So there's a lot of, you gotta really be committed.
Yeah.
Really
yeah. And people don't have,
tracking things down. And then there are the trust issues, and,
sure.
But that is what I really just wanted to kind of figure out, how to just do away with that, and make sure that we have clear communication, and we have a clear way for people to submit samples, have them taken seriously, have the results, and that is what's needed. And so whatever the conclusions are, they're going to be dependable conclusions.
Right. At least we know it's going to be done right. So
yeah,
we thank you for that. So
thank you for your time, my friend.
Thank you.
It's good seeing you, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks. Well, hopefully we're going to get this at some point to a conclusion, and he's going to come out and say, yes, we got some great samples, more than one. We've determined it is a non-classified primate that exists in North America, and we're going to call it Sasquatch or whatever. Or
there was a name, I don't even remember. I think Grover Krantz posed it, and I think Dr. Meldrum had some other thing. But I mean, I like to think that I would be the person that wouldn't need to be running around, calling 5,000 people saying, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so. But man, it would be so freaking cool.
You would. You'd have a t-shirt at the gym, and you'd wear your t-shirt everywhere, and you'd say, I told you so.
Yeah.
Bigfoot is real. I told you so.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be cool?
West Virginia, the bigfootdoc.com or whatever it is. So, So anyway, Twitter.
Yeah, please reach out to us. The bigfootdoc.com. What's our Gmail account?
wideopenresearch@gmail.com. Twitter, Instagram, Wide Open Research. Hit us there. I'm sure we'll be posting some stuff up there just to hopefully people can share that or pass around. It'll go to I'm sure the Facebook groups. Maybe we can get it shared on multiple Facebook groups, and
we'll pass that around. There for a while, it was kind of being held. There was only about a dozen of us that knew about it. We were just trying to collect those original samples, but here we go. Appreciate everybody listening, and appreciate your support. Hard to believe Brad and I have been doing this almost a year now. So,
all right, not ready to quit yet. So,
it's good to see you, my friend, and be safe in Florida. Thanks, everyone.
Later.